After Vice President Kamala Harris announced that she and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, would have a joint interview on CNN, a MAGA Fox News host was so triggered that she unleashed an unhinged rant on live TV, even though such joint interviews are pretty common. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Again, the press, mostly right-wing media, but even so-called mainstream media, have been very upset that the vice president has not sat down for an interview. But as we talked about in previous videos, she's currently winning the 2024 election, and it makes sense that she's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Why risk a particularly controversial interview? She's doing the right thing. Well, she finally agreed to sit down on CNN and be interviewed by Dana Bash along with Governor Tim Walz, her running mate. Again, very common. We'll get to that in just a second. But Dagen McDowell, who is one of the most unhinged Fox News hosts, was not happy about that. She was very upset, and she had this really weird rant on Fox, on live TV, that we have to talk about.
Electric cars, that she's the one who dug the financial hole that we're in. But to Kennedy's point, if she was to be the first woman running the United States of America, and she needs a man as a crutch, as a truss, as a neck pillow, as a seat cushion, because she can't get up there by herself, that she needs that guy to make her seem more likable or a little bit more coherent, to seem, marginally capable. That is shameful. And I say that as a woman, and anybody who tweets at me that, Trump does interviews with Mike Pence and J.D. Vance. You know what? She has done nothing. She has said nothing since she was anointed the Democrat nominee. And that is beside the point. And you crying sexism by me saying this makes her look weaker. So go ahead. She has time, though.
So I don't know if you're sexist. I do think you're an idiot, but it makes sense. She's an outspoken Trump supporter on Fox News. They tend to be pretty stupid. So a couple of things just to fact check Dagen McDowell. So as a reminder, Donald Trump is not a particularly favorable or popular candidate. This is something that Fox News hosts like Brit Hume and Karl Rove, who also really want Donald Trump to win this election, they have tried to express the fact that Donald Trump was never, is not, and shall never be a popular candidate. He never reached 50% approval rating when he was president. He was always underwater. Even as a candidate, even after being shot in the head, he could only break about 40% approval rating, according to most polls. Right now, Donald Trump, according to the polls in aggregate, 538, and they tend to look at these polls and measure it. So this is an aggregate, 52%, 52.5% unfavorable, and 42.9% favorable. So again, the majority of this country, not a fan of Donald Trump. In contrast, Vice President Harris is more popular than Donald Trump. Only 47%, 47.5%. Have an unfavorable view of Vice President Harris, again, compared to 52.5 for Donald Trump, and her favorability is 45.5, again, notably higher in aggregate than Donald Trump. So not sure why, Dagen McDowell is talking about popularity, because, again, generally speaking, Donald Trump loses. He lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton, lost the popular vote to President Biden, likely to lose the popular vote against Vice President Harris, even if he wins by way of the Electoral College, which is, as you know, affirmative action for an unpopular, ineffective political party, the Republicans. Also say, because she's like, maybe she needs help from Governor Walz in order to be coherent. I will also remind you that poll after poll after poll say that the vice president is more mentally fit to be president than Donald Trump. According to Morning Consult, only 48% of the country believes that Donald Trump is mentally fit to be president, compared to 65% for Vice President Kamala Harris. Other polls, as well as we talked about, swing state voters and a majority of Americans think that the vice president is more physically and mentally fit to be president than Donald Trump, who himself is a gaffe machine, right? So again, I'm not sure that she wants to start throwing stones in this glass house, because she's probably not going to win the argument. She, of course, being Dagen McDowell, the Fox host in question. But when it comes to the debate itself, a lot of Republicans are really upset by this. Piers Morgan, who swears that he's not a conservative, he is just a nonpartisan journalist who seems to consistently, almost without fail, grading Trump on a curve, right? We talked about this, his panels, the topics for his panels, the configuration of the panels. Trump critics are usually outnumbered by 2 to 3 to 4 to 1. We saw that with a friend of the show, Destiny. He's ducking Mehdi Hassan, Piers Morgan, because Piers Morgan likes to ask questions, and he certainly will give his opinion, but when he's on the back foot, which is quite often when it comes to U.S. politics, then he ducks behind, okay, well, I'm the host. I'm asking questions. You answer my questions. Mehdi Hassan has publicly and privately reached out to Piers Morgan to be interviewed by Mehdi Hassan, so he can't hide behind I'm just the host, I'm asking questions. But apparently Mehdi Hassan has not Piers Morgan has not taken Mehdi Hassan up on that particular offer. Piers Morgan says, pretty spineless for the woman seeking to smash the ultimate feminist glass ceiling and become America's first female president to need a bloke beside her for this interview to hold her hand. I hope Dana's first question is, Madam Vice President, what's he doing there? Now, there's no evidence, of course, that she needs Governor Walz to hold her hand, or that Governor Walz will hold her hand. As I pointed out in response, it's pretty pathetic when presidential candidates have joint interviews with their running mates. And of course, I was referring to Donald Trump having a joint interview with J.D. Vance, which of course happened after J.D. Vance became the presumptive Democratic nominee. Tennessee Holler on Twitter has also pointed out, again, that this is pretty common. Governor Mitt Romney, when he ran against President Obama in 2012, also one of the first interviews that they conducted after Paul Ryan became his running mate, they did a joint interview. Donald Trump and Mike Pence, President Obama, and then Vice President Joe Biden. And then, of course, in 2020, Vice President Biden and future Vice President and hopefully future President of the United States, Kamala Harris. So this is pretty traditional for these sorts of joint interviews. Now, eventually, the vice president will have one-on-one interviews. She's also had interviews prior to becoming the presumptive Democratic nominee and the official Democratic nominee, and she's answered questions from the press. Before she goes on planes or whatever, she talks to the press when they, are at Air Force Two. We've seen clips. We've talked about it in previous videos. But again, she's winning the election right now. So the logic is, why do something that isn't necessary at the moment to win, even if you personally believe that it's long overdue? She's also only been the presumptive Democratic nominee or the Democratic nominee for about a month. Okay, so you have to remember, she hasn't been running for president as often for as long as the Trump campaign. What it is that the press, particularly right-wing media, want to dictate terms to the vice president. But right now, they're not in a position to dictate terms to her. But again, she's going to have a conversation with Dana Bash, who, by the way, was one of the moderators in the disastrous debate between President Biden and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump publicly praised Dana Bash for being fair. Actually, a pretty tough moderator. So what it comes down to is people are upset that the vice president is being shrewd, that she's going to have this joint interview, which again is customary given the political environment for presidential candidates and vice presidential candidates to have joint interviews. And they dread the fact that there's likely going to be a lot of charisma and a lot of like A-plus media savvy coming from the vice president and Tim Walz, because they share a sense of camaraderie and they have good chemistry together. And that's what's freaking Fox News hosts like Dagen McDowell out, because they think it's more likely that Vice President Harris could come off more unlikable if she and Governor Walz are not sitting side by side. But that's any potential candidate, right? I mean, if you have two people who get along and who have a degree of charisma, them sitting side by side probably increases the likelihood that they will have a more favorable outcome, right? Because each of them can compensate for the other. If some person doesn't answer a question well, the other person can step in. That's the beauty of that sort of partnership. It's also part of the reason why presidential candidates do these things with their running mates. What they want is for the vice president to somehow make a fool of herself, and that's very unlikely, period. But it's even less likely if she has Governor Walz alongside her, and vice versa. They don't like that. And unfortunately for them, the vice president is not taking the bait. She is, conducting this campaign on her terms, not the media's terms. Maybe that'll change. Maybe in a week or two, she's going to have to give more and succumb to the media's demands. But right now, this is perfectly reasonable. And it's so funny to see the sort of meltdown from Fox News. I can't, she's got to do it one-on-one and she needs a man to help her. That's just, no, of course not. That's really not what this is. And Dagen McDowell, by the way, gave the game away because she knows, she's smart enough to realize like, okay, yeah, Donald Trump has done this. President Obama has done this. Other Republican candidates in the past, what they're doing is just moving the goalpost for Vice President Harris because they're losing this election and they're genuinely afraid of competing on even terms. So they're moving the goalpost to make things harder for her. And again, she's not falling for it. Love that energy. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.